Often I wonder why it is that I get omitted from so many hit pieces about YouTubers and commentary and politics. And don't get me wrong, I get included in some of these for sure. There are some people who get excluded more than I. Most notably, I believe Matt Christensen, who's got stronger opinions than I do on a lot of these issues. I'm more centrist than he is, although I think he's a fairly centrist, kind of like right-leaning guy. I'm not too sure, but he does get excluded more often than I do. But there's a reason why I think that is, and it's because, listen, I am not a free speech absolutist. I'm not. Let me explain. Typically, free speech absolutism refers to a group of people, they're real people, who believe that you should be able to yell fire in a theater, that you should be able to incite people to violence, you should be allowed to say whatever you want because speech is not an action. I disagree. I think that over time, we have come to understand and recognize there are certain limitations on speech in the United States. I tend to be in favor of the history of the US and how we've come to shape free speech as it exists. For the most part, we want to protect someone's rights to their opinions. Okay, so if you want to say something that's extremely racist, I don't like what you're saying, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Now, if you want to openly scream to tell people to go do something to someone of a different race, this is where you're crossing the line, and I don't think you should be allowed to do that, okay? Now, one of the arguments from many of the far-left people is that hateful rhetoric leads to those conversations. Well, look, sure, argue the nuance and the fine line point, but there's still a distinction between someone saying that if someone said, man, I really don't like pineapple on pizza, I'd be like, okay. And if they went, you, go destroy all pineapple pizzas, I'd be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Right, crossing a line here for me, buddy. Don't tell people to go do things, all right? And admittedly, it does get to a fine point, but the idea is if you're actively trying to get people to commit some kind of violence or crime, I believe you're crossing the line. You're creating this phenomenon. And so this is where we come into this story, which I don't know if we need to read into too much. Basically, the story is this woman was the subject to a troll storm, and she won a lawsuit against one of the trolls. I don't know, I believe she's still in a suit with the Daily Stormer, but basically they started sending her a bunch of racist comments and things like that. Here's the thing, not a free speech absolutist. There are harassment laws, and that means to a certain extent you are responsible. If, for instance, you show up to someone's house every day and stand outside yelling mean things and racist things, there is a certain point at which what you're doing does become a crime. Okay, because harassment is a crime. There's a reason why we distinguish between harassment and actual speech. So this is even a fine line for social media too. So if you want to go out and espouse your beliefs, okay, you're free to do so. And I'll say this too, the reason we have courts is because the courts need to interpret what is or is not acceptable, because sometimes we can't be absolute on these rules. So here's what happens. We want to protect your right to go stand in the street and yell what you believe, to hand out signs, to speak your mind and express your beliefs, even if they're awful, maybe even if they're great, whatever. We want you to be able to speak. But if you're engaging in repeated targeted behavior against an individual for the purpose of just causing them strife, at a certain point, it actually is a crime. I'm not exaggerating. It's harassment. Doesn't mean I agree with what happened in this case. I'm just pointing out that often you have a lot of people, I'm seeing people, they're sharing the story around, right? Because basically, I don't think the New York Times actually says what happened. There's some egregious things in here that are rather shocking, and that's why I want to talk about the story. But the first thing I want to point out is basically what this guy who was sued, what he did was, he said something like, let me see. He told people to bring bananas at a student government at one point, McCarty tweeted, "Everyone bring bananas" at a student government account posting information about an upcoming student town hall where Dumpson would be present. He continued to tweet pictures of bananas at her account and others alongside the phrase "ooga booga," meant to demean Dumpson and other African Americans by comparing her to a monkey. What he did was not criminal. He settled a lawsuit where he has to renounce white supremacy and he has to, what does he have to do? He has to help them in their case against Daily Stormer or something. So this is a rather short story, so let's just read this. Dumpson, So let's see, the neo-Nazi website Daily Stormer and his publisher Andrew Anglin posted this story in February, and Anglin whipped his followers into a vicious troll storm against Dumpson. Dumpson brought suit, and now one of the men who aggressively went after her on social media, Evan James McCarty of Oregon, will face his punishment. According to the settlement agreement released Tuesday, McCarty will have to complete 1 year of anti-hate training sessions and 4 academic courses on issues relating to gender and race. Then for 2 years, he'll have to publicly advocate against hate and perhaps work with de-radicalization groups for white supremacists. He has to apologize twice in written and video form. And Dumpson, now a 22-year-old law school student, can release the video for educational and advocacy purposes if she wishes. So what I want to point out here, the distinction between free speech, violation of free speech, what this guy did was dopey and wasn't criminal, okay? He said mean things to this person. She sued him and he settled with her. It's not a criminal proceeding, it's a civil proceeding. This is entirely a part of American politics. The fact that she had the resources to go after this individual. I wouldn't necessarily call this a violation of the First Amendment, although it is definitely an attack on his right to speech. I would also want to point out the fine line. By all means, be a bad person, tweet bad things. However, what's interesting here is that the first line of recourse is not a lawsuit, and this is where it can actually become a little egregious. The first line of recourse is Twitter removing this person for violating the rules. Before we get anywhere near criminal and civil proceedings, you would think Twitter would say, hey, look, we understand if you want to criticize a person. It's another thing if you repeatedly tweet racist and offensive things at a person. Seriously. Often, so the problem I have when it comes to Twitter and many of these platforms is that if you want to say something on Twitter, like, actually, I'll put it this way. If he tweeted to her one time something offensive or derogatory, I'd say, hey, man, look. But if he keeps doing it over and over again as an attempt to antagonize, then I would recognize Twitter saying, you are just trying to damage the platform and cause these problems. However, that's why there's a block function. So this is why I think this actually kind of goes too far. First, I believe it is wrong to engage in troll storm harassment campaigns against individuals. But I think you enter wishy-washy territory when you then sue somebody over them posting tweets at you. Admittedly, he only lost because he probably didn't have the resources. Welcome to America. People with resources are going to win the legal fight. But I also think that it shouldn't even get to this point because you can just block people. Out of sight, out of mind. If this woman was really upset about it, she could have blocked him. This is really interesting. I don't know. What I find interesting about this is that it kind of bypasses a lot of the traditional arguments we have on free speech. Because this is a private matter. He didn't have to settle, but he didn't have the resources to fight. He also didn't have the ability to raise funds, so it lends itself to an interesting phenomenon. Now, I think the New York Times didn't actually even state what he did, but I want to read one part. So the lawsuit stated that Ms. Dumpson constantly feared for her safety amid the relentless harassment and was eventually diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Despite that turmoil, she graduated from American University and now enrolled in the school. So the point was she tried to show real damages, that she had PTSD from being harassed so much. You know, I'm not, again, this is a really weird gray area for everything having to do with free speech because I'm gonna say right now, if you are trying to cause actual kind of psychological harm to an individual, then we come to a certain point where we do have to recognize it is possible. What I don't like is the idea that because 50 people are messaging you, that somehow is damage and all that speech need to be stopped. No. What I'm specifically referring to is, and I don't know if he did, if this one individual, as an individual, for like weeks on end was constantly tweeting at her, then you could argue, yes, he's done something that crosses the line. The problem, I guess, is that she could have just blocked him. And I have to ask why she didn't. This is where it gets really complicated. How do we end the harassment? Okay, how do we get to a point where we can say, dude, come on, man, I think most of you can agree, you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be messaging people trying to piss them off and troll them and make them angry relentlessly to the point where it's actually causing them strife. But at the same time, why not just block them? How can we build a culture where we can tell people, you know, hey, maybe you shouldn't do something like that. Maybe we should have a real conversation while still recognizing individuals have the ability to protect themselves on these platforms. I'm also surprised Twitter didn't block the guy, which is another interesting conundrum. And then I guess I just have to throw it to you because, look, the main reason I want to talk about this is because this is a really good, nuanced issue having to do with free speech. Do we criticize those who actively engage in a legitimate harassment campaign? Look, Anita Sarkeesian said that people telling her that she sucked and was stupid was a harassment campaign. I disagree. But if you, for an extended period of time, send racist comments and derogatory comments just meant to antagonize people, at a certain point, it is a harassment campaign. Is it a violation of free speech? At some point, yes, it can break the law. But how do we build a better culture and deal with this? And I guess for the most part, as like the final video I have on this, I think it's really important to bring up nuance in these speech issues. This has to do with class, it has to do with race, it has to do with free speech, and I guess at this point just comment and let me know what you think. I know there's going to be a lot of free speech absolutists saying, nope, he should be allowed to say it, and I don't necessarily disagree, because she has that control, but I don't know. I just found it interesting because this dude's facing actual ramifications, not because he broke any laws, not because he did anything that is literally, like, she can't really sue him for this, but she still won. Like, hold on. You can sue a ham sandwich, doesn't mean you're going to win. But she won because she had the resources to run him through court, and he didn't. And that presents another issue, which is interesting. So, I don't know. I just wanted to bring it up. This is an important story because it's confusing. And it's hard to know where the line is. And maybe there isn't. Maybe it's just shades of gray, and we got to figure out when and how to interpret how we handle these situations. So, I don't know. Comment. We'll keep the conversation going, and I'll see you guys tomorrow on the main channel at 4 p.m.